They built one of the most beloved car shows on television, a perfect blend of charm and skill. Mike Brewer was the deal-maker, Edd China the mechanical genius. Together, they made Wheeler Dealers a global phenomenon. But in 2017, everything changed. Edd walked away from the show, leaving fans stunned and searching for answers. What followed was more than just a casting change. It was the unraveling of a friendship, a battle over creative control, and a fan base torn in two. While Edd pointed to behind-the-scenes interference and the loss of authentic content, Mike claimed he was blindsided. The internet exploded with rumors, accusations, and unanswered questions. Was Edd pushed out? Did Mike side with producers? And why haven't the two spoken since? The truth behind Edd China's departure and his quiet feud with Mike Brewer is far more painful than anyone expected. This is the real story of how a legendary partnership fell apart when the cameras weren't rolling. In 2003, Wheeler Dealers premiered on the Discovery Channel in the UK with modest expectations, but within just a few seasons, it became a global hit. At the heart of the show's unexpected success was a perfectly balanced duo. Mike Brewer, the fast-talking car trader with charisma and connections, and Edd China, the towering soft-spoken mechanic with brilliant hands and a mind for complex restorations. Together, they brought a chemistry that was as authentic as it was entertaining. Mike handled the buying, selling, and negotiations, the wheeling and dealing. He had the gift of the gab, a background in car sales, and a natural comfort in front of the camera. Edd, on the other hand, was the mechanical soul of the show. In a world full of fast-paced edits and flashy builds, Edd slowed things down. He explained every step, showed every bolt, and made complicated repairs look possible, even for viewers with zero experience. It was educational without being boring, and Edd's calm demeanor made him an instant fan favorite. Their formula was simple but revolutionary for its time, and sell it for a profit. No fake drama, no shouting matches, no staged breakdowns, just real cars, real repairs, and real numbers. Mike and Edd were never portrayed as rivals. They were teammates. Mike found the cars, Edd fixed them, and together, they turned forgotten classics into beautiful machines. Viewers from around the world were drawn in, not just by the cars, but by the genuine respect and camaraderie between the two men. They didn't always agree, but they clearly trusted each other. And that dynamic made Wheeler Dealers more than just a car show. It was an automotive journey grounded in passion, craftsmanship, and a real partnership. But even in those early seasons, the seeds of future conflict were unknowingly being planted. Because while the show grew bigger and more commercial, the question was already starting to form. Could the creative spirit that built Wheeler Dealers survive the pressures of TV production? While Wheeler Dealers was built on the concept of buying and flipping used cars for profit, it was Edd China who gave the show its heart and its brains. From the moment he rolled up his sleeves in the original workshop, it was clear this wasn't a flashy reality TV mechanic. Edd was the real deal. Meticulous, thoughtful, and quietly brilliant, he brought a level of authenticity that few automotive shows ever attempted, let alone sustained. What made Edd stand out wasn't just his height or his iconic messy hair. It was his approach. Instead of glossing over mechanical issues, he dove deep. He would explain the inner workings of suspension systems, tackle complex electrical problems, and walk viewers through engine overhauls with clarity and patience. For aspiring mechanics, garage hobbyists, and curious viewers alike, Edd's segments were both masterclasses and confidence boosters. Edd didn't just fix cars, he taught the audience how to fix them. He respected the viewer's intelligence, never dumbing things down or skipping over the hard stuff, and that's what made him beloved. His garage segments were long, often detailed to a fault, but they were the very reason many tuned in week after week. His calm, problem-solving demeanor offered the perfect counterbalance to Mike Brewer's fast-talking energy. While Mike hustled the deals and navigated negotiations, Edd stayed grounded in the technical realities of the work. He ensured that wheeler dealers never strayed too far into entertainment and always stayed rooted in education. Fans didn't just like Edd, they trusted him, and that trust became the foundation of the show's credibility. Without him, many viewers believed the show would lose its soul. Unfortunately, as time went on, network executives had different ideas about what wheeler dealers should become, and Edd's insistence on doing things the right way would soon clash with their push for a more commercial formula. As wheeler dealers gained international success, its production shifted. In later seasons, the show came under the control of Discovery's US-based production arm, which saw an opportunity to repackage the content for a broader, more entertainment-focused audience. That shift brought in bigger budgets, flashier editing, and expanded marketing, but it also came with new priorities. Behind the scenes, Discovery reportedly began pushing for a format that placed more emphasis on the personalities and less on the process. In particular, they wanted to shorten Edd's repair segments, streamline the technical content, and focus more on the flip aspect of the show: buy, gloss, sell. For longtime fans who loved the hands-on, educational aspect, this was a red flag. But for Edd, it was something worse, a compromise he wasn't willing to make. He voiced concerns early on. According to his later public statements, he strongly disagreed with the idea of cutting down the workshop scenes, especially when it meant removing the very parts of the show that taught viewers how to do real repairs. Edd argued that speeding up repairs would hurt the integrity of the series and alienate its core fan base. The network, however, had data on their side. Shorter segments meant tighter episodes. Tighter episodes meant more ad revenue. It was a classic conflict between creative integrity and commercial viability. And Edd, never one to chase the spotlight or bend to studio pressure, was increasingly isolated in his position. Mike, who had always acted as the show's frontman and businessman, found himself in a difficult spot. While Edd was pushing back, Mike was reportedly more open to the changes, either to keep the show afloat or to align with Discovery's broader goals. That difference in perspective marked a turning point in their partnership. The tension between content and commerce was no longer a slow burn. It was heading straight for a collision. As Discovery's influence grew behind the scenes, Mike Brewer found himself in a complex and controversial position. On one hand, he had built wheeler dealers from the ground up and remained committed to its success. On the other, he was now caught between a co-host who valued craftsmanship above all else and a network demanding a faster, flashier product. Some fans argue Mike was simply doing what he had to do to keep the show alive, adapting to the demands of television while trying to preserve as much of the original format as possible. After all, he wasn't a mechanic. His job was to make deals, move the story along, and ensure the show remained profitable. From that angle, Mike may have seen Edd's resistance as inflexible, even risky. But others believe Mike didn't just go along with the changes. He supported them, even if it meant marginalizing Edd. Behind the scenes, there were whispers that Mike had sided with the producers more than once, and that he had grown tired of Edd's unwillingness to compromise. Some claimed Mike had become too closely aligned with Discovery, prioritizing the show's brand and his own role over the original mission. The truth likely sits somewhere in the middle. Mike and Edd had always been very different personalities. Mike was the entertainer, the brand builder. Edd was the purist, the craftsman. Their differences had always complemented each other, until now, when those differences collided. Whether Mike was caught in the middle or consciously chose his path, his alignment with Discovery's vision put him on the opposite side of the creative divide. And while nothing explosive happened on camera, the silence between them grew louder behind the scenes. The final crack in the foundation was coming, and it would leave fans questioning not just the direction of the show, but the future of the friendship that made Wheeler Dealers great in the first place. On March 21, 2017, fans of Wheeler Dealers were blindsided. Edd China uploaded a YouTube video titled "Edd China on Leaving Wheeler Dealers," and the automotive world exploded. Calm and composed, Edd looked directly into the camera and explained, in his usual measured tone, that he would no longer be part of the show. But it wasn't the kind of friendly goodbye viewers were used to. Edd didn't mince words. He cited creative differences with the new U.S. production company as the core reason for his departure. Specifically, he took issue with the plan to cut down the in-depth workshop segments, the very thing that made Wheeler Dealers unique. Edd explained that removing detailed repairs would be a disservice to the fans, and said he could not, in good conscience, continue a version of the show that compromised its educational integrity. The reaction was immediate. Comments flooded in. Viewers around the world voiced support for Edd, praising his integrity and thanking him for years of hands-on instruction. Many blamed the network. Others blamed Mike Brewer directly, despite his absence from Edd's video. It wasn't just a cast change. It felt like the soul of the show had been ripped out. What made the moment even more shocking was how quietly it happened. There were no joint statements, no farewell episodes, no behind-the-scenes send-off. Just Edd, a camera, and the calm dismantling of a beloved partnership. Behind the grace of his delivery, fans sensed something deeper: frustration, disappointment, and a parting of ways that ran far deeper than creative differences alone. The departure left a vacuum, not just in the garage, but in the relationship that had once made Wheeler Dealers so universally loved. Just days after Edd's announcement, Mike Brewer released a public response, and it was raw. Visibly emotional, Mike claimed he was devastated by Edd's decision and insisted he hadn't wanted him to leave. According to Mike, Edd's video had taken him completely by surprise. He denied playing any role in pushing Edd out and suggested that Edd's messaging had unfairly shifted the blame onto him. But by then, the damage was done. Fans had already chosen sides. Social media erupted with outrage, and much of it was directed at Mike. Longtime viewers accused him of betraying Edd, selling out to Discovery, or failing to protect the integrity of the show. Hashtags like #Team Edd started trending. The comments on Mike's pages turned hostile, many demanding answers or apologies. Some even went further, sending death threats and abusive messages to Mike and his family. Mike, clearly rattled, made several emotional statements online and in interviews, saying the backlash was the worst abuse he'd ever received. He described how the attacks affected his wife and daughter, calling it a nightmare. He repeatedly denied being the reason for Edd's departure and asked fans to consider how much he had invested in the show, too. Despite his attempts to clarify the situation, Mike's reputation took a major hit. Where Edd's video had been calm and dignified, Mike's responses felt reactive and defensive. The contrast only fueled fan division. For many, it was no longer just a TV split. It was a war of values: authenticity versus commercialism, passion versus profit. The backlash marked a turning point. Whatever had happened between Edd and Mike behind the scenes, it was now painfully clear that the relationship had fractured, and there was no going back. Since that fateful split in 2017, one thing has remained constant: The silence between Edd China and Mike Brewer. There have been no reunions, no joint interviews, and not even the briefest public acknowledgement of each other in the years that followed. For two men who built over a decade of success together, the absence of communication speaks volumes. Edd, for his part, has taken the high road. He has never directly attacked Mike in public, nor has he divulged any personal details about their fallout. His statements remain focused on his reasons for leaving: creative integrity, production disagreements, and the desire to preserve the original spirit of Wheeler Dealers. But his silence on Mike's role has only fueled speculation. Was he being diplomatic? Or was he protecting something darker? Mike, meanwhile, has avoided talking about Edd altogether. After the initial storm died down, he returned to hosting Wheeler Dealers with new mechanics. First Ant Anstead, then Mark Priestley, but noticeably avoided comparing them to Edd. In fact, fans noted how rarely Edd's name came up at all, as though he had been quietly erased from the show's history. That absence has left a lingering unease. Fans still post regularly on forums and social media, asking if the two have made amends or will ever work together again. The answer, at least publicly, appears to be no. The silence feels like a wall, one built not out of hatred but hurt. A slow, painful end to what was once one of the most genuine partnerships on automotive television. No fireworks, no final showdown, just an unresolved Cold War between two men who built something special and then walked away from it, separately. When the dust settled after Edd China's departure, both men took very different paths, each revealing more about who they were all along. For Edd, leaving Wheeler Dealers wasn't the end of his public presence. It was a new beginning. He launched his YouTube channel, Edd China's Garage Revival, returning to the kind of in-depth, educational content fans had always loved. His focus? Restoring cars while preserving the spirit of DIY enthusiasm and transparency that made him famous. Edd also explored new projects, including a prototype electric ice cream van, engineering challenges, and guest appearances at automotive events. His presence remained consistent with his identity: calm, inventive, and deeply rooted in the mechanical side of the craft. Though his content wasn't as frequent as a network-backed series, fans praised the authenticity and felt like Edd had returned to his roots. Mike Brewer, meanwhile, stayed in the Wheeler Dealers spotlight. The show continued on with new mechanics. First Ant Anstead, whose chemistry with Mike was praised, and then Mark Elvis Priestley, a former F1 mechanic. While the show carried on and introduced new viewers, many longtime fans felt something was missing. The banter, the balance, the trust. Edd's absence was still deeply felt. Though Mike stayed busy with spin-offs, live events, and dealership ventures, the shadow of Edd's departure loomed over him for years. Interviews about the show often avoided Edd's name entirely, and despite the show's ongoing evolution, the original magic never quite returned. In the aftermath, both men appeared to be thriving in their own ways, but the void between them never closed. And for fans, the show's golden era remained in the past, defined not by the cars, but by the unlikely friendship that once brought them to life. Years later, the Wheeler Dealers fan base remains fractured, divided into two passionate camps, Team Edd and Team Mike. And it's not just harmless internet banter. For many, it represents a deeper cultural divide between values in the car world. Purity of craft versus commercial pragmatism. Supporters of Edd argue that he was the soul of the show. They credit him with making Wheeler Dealers educational, honest, and valuable beyond entertainment. For them, his departure marked the loss of what made the series different from every other reality car show. To this day, His fans flood social media with nostalgia clips, old episode rewatches, and ongoing calls for his return, even knowing it's unlikely. On the other side, Mike has retained a strong following, particularly among viewers who enjoy the fast-paced format, evolving production value, and variety of cars the show has tackled since Edd's exit. Many argue that Mike kept the show alive, adapted to industry changes, and carried on despite the immense pressure and backlash. They see him not as the villain, but as the survivor. Still, even neutral fans can't ignore how Wheeler Dealers changed after 2017. The tone shifted. The warmth between hosts vanished. The educational depth was trimmed, and the sense of camaraderie felt scripted rather than earned. Even though both men have moved on, the fans haven't. Forums still spark with heated debates over what really happened. Reddit threads dissect interviews, YouTube comments speculate about silent grudges, and every time Edd posts a new video, someone inevitably asks, "Will you ever go back?" That divide remains a reminder of what Wheeler Dealers once was, and what it lost. It's the question that refuses to fade. Will Edd China and Mike Brewer ever reunite? For years, fans have held out hope for a joint interview, a surprise cameo, or even a new show that brings the two back together. But as time stretches on, that possibility feels more and more like a fantasy. Publicly, neither man has shown interest in rekindling their working relationship. Edd continues to quietly innovate in his own lane, focused on creative freedom, independent projects, and staying true to the hands-on ethos that built his following. Mike, meanwhile, remains the face of Wheeler Dealers, building new partnerships, hosting spin-offs, and embracing the polished entertainment model that now defines the show. Neither has thrown public punches since the fallout, but neither has extended an olive branch either. Their silence has become its own kind of closure, one that fans were never quite given. And yet, there's something undeniably tragic about how it ended. These weren't just co-workers, they were co-creators. They built something iconic together, a show that blended education, entertainment, and passion in a way few others ever have. And whether it was the pressure of production, a clash of values, or a betrayal never publicly aired, something broke, and neither of them has ever really explained it. If a reunion does come, it likely won't be on camera. It might be a private handshake behind the scenes. Or perhaps it won't come at all. Because sometimes, even the strongest partnerships dissolve, not in explosions, but in silence. But one thing is certain, Wheeler Dealers was never the same after Edd left. And the story of why remains one of the most compelling and heartbreaking chapters in automotive television history.